welcome everybody else on that note. I bet there's nobody else quite with one of those mugs this afternoon. I know there are people still joining us all the time, but I am going to be quite sharp with our time this afternoon and kick off because there's quite a bit we want to run through with you, and I also want to honour trying to finish at 4:30 today GMT. So let me just start by saying thank you. Thank you for choosing to join us on this particular subject today. We're really encouraged by the number of individuals interested. Before we get going, just to really kind of from a formalities perspective, just to share, please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions just throughout the session as we go. I just say it's very much a safe space this afternoon. We're a learning community, so there's definitely no such thing as a silly question. But I'd also invite you to comment on anything as you're leaning into this afternoon that you think, well, we're doing this or this particular thing's working well for us. So as ever, do think of this as a peer-to-peer learning environment. It's just that LHH are hosting your time this afternoon. We'll not particularly have capacity during the flow of the session to get into much of a Q&A, so you are muted. But what we are going to do is honour towards the end of the session, coming off our recorded session and giving you time if there are any outstanding questions or anything we haven't particularly addressed in the chat functionality for you. So we'll make sure that time's honoured before we close out today. Hong Liu will be with you for the next hour, really leaning in and my apologies there. I am guilty of having a slightly unstable network due to Storm Debbie, so we are going to be quite agile this afternoon if my connection drops on us. But just to share really that the reason for doing this with you today, the reason for picking this particular space is, well, first of all, it's nearly 2024, so how can we not be leaning into a discussion around AI? But secondly, and this was a real passion for me particularly because I host some regular HR roundtables for HR talent colleagues. And we've discussed, since 2020, we've discussed everything from furloughing, unfurloughing, hybrid working. And the only conversation piece that I have felt for you all has been kind of stickier, less flowing, less kind of almost safe and kind of moving things forward has been this space around AI. And I've had colleagues such as yourself asking other colleagues, what are you actually doing? And it's sort of not moving forward. So I'm really keen that the goal today is to give you the ability to be able to ask each other much more informed questions, much more able to lean in and kind of know, what is it I'm trying to ask? What is it I really want to know? And really, I think that's probably where we are and how we're kind of adopting the right mindsets of learning growth. So can I just invite you to nudge the slide forward? Okay. I'm just going to give us a little bit of context before I do hand over to Tong, who is a data scientist with LHH, and he definitely holds the expertise. My observations really is just bringing a bit of a platform because I sit with HR colleagues so regularly leaning into this space. And my first kind of reflection for you is really just to say, is it just me or is anyone else out there struggling with the concept that Pluto may no longer be a planet? And I share this because I love learning, right? I really love learning, but I'm really uncomfortable with that. You can tell me there's a new planet and I can completely get on board with that. But tell me to unlearn that Pluto's maybe not a planet. It's really interesting because I think I've got a great growth mindset because I love learning, but there's my discomfort straight away out there. Rethinking and unlearning is definitely much harder than learning. And I guess that's part of the context of space as we try and think and lean in to what's happening out there. Obviously, we are living through a bit of a changing world of work at the moment. And I also just want to acknowledge in this VUCA worlds, And I'm now adapting the fact that we're living in this bunny world. And I say that in particular because VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. Oh, thank you very much. There you go. It's my discomfort, obviously a long-held belief from my schooling days, built around a stable era, not these VUCA and bunny worlds. But what's really interesting about VUCA is that was born out of an age of digitization and globalization, right? It was built for the start of the century to help us understand how we're kind of navigating our world. But, you know, that was also an era when smartphones were just entering the market. It's incredible how much we're adapting and changing all the time. And Banny, which I am going to quickly refer to my notes because I should know this, but it's brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. It's really just saying we are in an acceleratingly rapid world of change. But the thing is, I do believe that actually we've all had our mental pliability tested in recent years. And I really do think we need to not lose sight of what we've lived through. It's not that long ago that it was incomprehensible for us to consider the fact that it was unsafe to go to hospital. It was unsafe to eat in a restaurant. And, you know, and I genuinely do this with feeling, and forgive the sensitivity, but it was, could you have ever imagined it was unsafe to hug a parent or a grandparent? And the reality of it is we have lived through incredible change. And I'm kind of just trying to acknowledge this incredible world that we have kind of lived through. I love this quote, and I want you to hold this quote. There's a little bit of a gift if you haven't come across this quote by George Bernard Shaw, because I think as we lean into things like AI and generative AI, progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. And I say that with the context of the Pluto comment as well, is sometimes we do have to kind of let go, because we might actually be harboring some quite long-held beliefs, and to open our minds fully. It's a nice quote. Can I just nudge the next slide, please? I just wanted to share as well, and in case this is of interest to anyone, the ADECO group, which LHH is part of the ADECO group, we undertake regular research. So there's an annual report, which I'll come back to you, Jerry, on that one, if that's okay. But there's an annual report on the future world of work, the global workforce of the future, that we produce. And we can share this with you after this session if you're particularly interested. The reason I want to draw attention to it is we run it annually. It's 30,000 workers across 23 countries globally that we lean into to kind of as a business create some focus around where we're leaning in, but also what are the data pieces we can be sharing with our client organizations. The reason for pulling this through, though, is that actually there's some great research that I think is quite pertinent to what we're going to discuss today, and that Tong's going to really bring to life for you. And that I'm going to start with a couple of headlines, if I may, for you. The majority of workers out there, according to this research, are optimistic about the impact of AI on jobs, 61%. And interestingly, there's also data from this report that says 70% of us are already using AI in some capacity, which is also, you know, in our roles, which is quite interesting as well. But critically, there is a quarter of our workforce out there that remains negative about the impact on our jobs. So there is lots of data in this report, and I'd love you to, if you are interested, lean into it further. But one of the key things I did want to share was this piece around skills. So if we kind of take this headline here, 61% of employees think that human touch is more influential at work than AI. It's actually, when we really dig into the data, some of what this is really telling us is that human touch is critical to enabling this kind of next phase that we're living through, and really immersing and making the most of the opportunity that AI, generative AI, brings. I love the fact that it pulls out the least replaceable human skills, being emotional intelligence, empathy, active listening, and interpersonal skills. And I love this in particular because this really gives us some focus in this really, really busy, banny world that we've just been clarifying. But the reality of it is, in a very, very busy, complex world, but with huge amounts of change, having a little bit of focus on what are the skills that are going to be most resilient for us as HR professionals, but also for our workforce, that's actually quite encouraging. I also wanted to acknowledge that, this is a very human-centric language, isn't it? So when we are finding now that we talk to human-centric leadership as a key skills bucket, and these skills talk to that as well. I just want to acknowledge that, the 1920s actually saw our first human relations movement with the Hawthorne effect. And many of you will know of the Hawthorne effect. It was the studies that evidence that if we improve working conditions, we improve productivity. And we kind of see that as the first recorded human relations movement. Real movement around job enrichment. The 1980s obliterated all of this as we brought in real kind of performance culture. Toxic workplaces really kind of were born out of that. And to some extent, we're still working to unpick that. But of course, the language we're now hearing culturally that fits with the evolution from VUCA to BANI and where we are today is that we're hearing much more about learning culture, about mindset and psychological safety. So the environments in which we can make mistakes and learn, the environments where we can pivot and be much more agile. And that's much more fitting, obviously, for where we are today. So human-centric leadership, very much something that we're taking forward as we lean in to start thinking about AI. I think what I'd really like you to do before I really involve Tong's expertise here is just consider from a human perspective, your own HR functions. I'm pretty confident a lot of you have been through a pretty tough year. There have been, and great if this hasn't been directly impacting you, but we have seen considerable layoffs this year. There has been a lot of reorganization, and it can be really difficult to maintain the human side of HR process during that. But the most kind of resilient and the least replaceable human skills, to what extent do we think our HR brands are known for this at the moment? And I think it's a really nice time towards the end of 2023 to be reflecting, how are we perceived? How are we perceived individually? How are we perceived as functions with regard to this opportunity? And that's just a reflection really to share as we move into starting to have a dialogue with Tong. Tong, I would love to involve you now more directly into the conversation. I've done a bit of positioning there. I'd really like to introduce you to everybody. You're a data scientist with the LHH, but before you delve into the content that you're going to take everyone through, can you just share a little bit about your career, how you came to be a data scientist with us today?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Sinead, for the introduction, and thank you so much for everybody to join this session today. As a data scientist, I had a relatively atypical career trajectory because most data scientists either come from the computer science background or a data engineering background. I, on the other hand, studied social psychology. Specifically, I researched persuasion and attitude change in graduate school. And entering the labor force, I started my career as a market researcher. However, I was working in Seattle, where there's a big tech hub there. Most of my clients are big tech companies. I saw with my own eyes the rise of big data, how new technology is making conventional market research easier and easier, how smaller players start to challenge big established companies like my employer back then. In fact, I myself successfully took on some independent contracting jobs and felt like I did just as good at a job with the support of technology. So I started transitioning into big data and machine learning. So before AI was so popularly known as AI, on the technical side of things, we're just talking about machine learning. Following that lead, even though at the time machine learning did not have that much application at the companies I worked for, coming to LHH is the same situation. I was lucky enough to have a manager who's really supportive of my development. And also, he is a data nerd like me. We're both passionate about this emerging technology. We invested making experimental projects. And going from there, we started to understand this new generation of machine learning techniques better and better. And when this AI explosion happened, we find ourselves really ready for it. And on top of that, combining with my personal hobby, I really feel this AI development is my moment, because the most important AI tools today is mostly about language. And I love poetry. I love creative writing. I sometimes tell people that my first language is not even Chinese, it's poetry. So with the combination of knowledge in psychology that helps you understand a human-like cognition system, and my background in machine learning and statistics, and my passion with writing, I'm ready to surf the wave. I couldn't see this coming just 2 years ago.
I absolutely love that. And I'm hoping for all of the audience, they may have colleagues that they think, oh, I'd love to hear them talk about their career journey in this way as well. I really like the piece around poetry and language, Tom. That kind of grabbed me a bit. And you're absolutely right. So there's a real passion. How is that supporting the work that you're doing in this phase of work now?
So because today's AI this around the breakthrough in AI is mostly done through language models. We are looking into a new era where we will be interacting with some of the most important computer systems just through natural language, because the AI understands our language and know a lot of human knowledge. That's the most effective way to communicate some very complicated tasks to them. So being able to write very precisely, very clearly, is the table stake to be a good communicator, to be a good user of these systems. But on top of that, these AI also emulate human. They learned from us. So if you can express your ideas in a beautiful way, in a high quality way, it will reflect back to you. It will give you beautiful and high quality results.
I love that. That's definitely a takeaway for me personally. I love this idea of beautiful, high quality results. So good input, great output. And I'm hoping that resonates very well for our HR colleagues out there as well, who spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how do I engage? How do I communicate with my workforce? So actually, there's probably a great skill set there already, ready to be nurtured. Tom, just before you kind of take over the main presentation, I guess just one final question from me, which is, there's 25% of the workforce out there still a bit concerned about the negative impact. Do you hold any I'm saying that carefully because I hear the passion, but do you hold any concerns?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, there's a range from worst case scenario to best case scenario that I can imagine, and the bad outcomes toward the worst scenario end of the spectrum does concern me quite a bit. Among those is the main concern is very HR related. I really think if we don't handle this very fast and significant economic transition well, there might be a chance that we will see devastation to the white collar middle class. And with that, all kinds of unseen social consequences.
Well, Tung, I feel like I could really sort of probe into that, but what I'm going to do is just kind of pause it there. We might revisit that towards the end of the session. That might have posed some questions, but I'm going to see that, where your presentation, you've got a core presentation that you've prepared for everyone today. So can I hand over to you to take us through that? And then potentially we might just revisit that cliff edge that you gave us there.
Yes, yes. In fact, we'll touch upon that a little bit. It will be a great teasing up once I arrive at the second half of my presentation. All right, should we get started on the presentation? Okay, thank you again, everybody. We'll now give the stage to the main star today. I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the AI. So today we're going to learn about what this round of new AI technology is all about and their potential impact. We'll do so by going through a few steps. First, we want to take a quick look into the history, understand how we arrived here, what led to the rise of generative AI. We'll also examine the state of the art. We want to look at what is the most capable and most useful AI tools today, what they can do well, and what they can not do well yet. Then we'll peek into the future. We'll first examine things we feel more confident about, the trends we're already seeing, what's likely to happen in the next few months. But we'll also venture into more speculative territory where we think about the overall impact of this round of AI on the labor market, on the economy, and maybe on our life and society in general. Lastly, I have some thoughts to share with you how I think HR professionals and businesses can respond to this trend. But if we don't have enough time by then, I'm more inclined to open the floor to questions and answer questions of higher interest. So we'll get started with a brief history of generative AI. So artificial intelligence became a very hot topic this year. I wouldn't be surprised that you are using this term more in your conversation, both at work and perhaps also at home. I think it's a good idea from the top to understand the definition of a few key concepts in this area, so you can speak about them more intelligently. Even before this round of AI frenzy, terms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning have been used all over the place in tech news, and many times interchangeably. So why is that? What exactly are the definition and how do they relate? There are no definitive answers to these questions. The diagram I have here more or less shows the industry consensus about those questions. As you can see, artificial intelligence actually refers to the largest category of all. It refers to any kind of technique that try to enable machine to mimic human behavior. And many early examples of artificial intelligence actually cannot learn in reference to machine learning. For example, in the 1960s, the very first chatbot, Eliza, was invented. You can have a conversation with Eliza and have this illusion that you're talking to an agent. But what the system does really was just capturing certain keywords in your input and go to a pre-scripted pool of sentences and grab one as your response. It was that simple and that rigid. But with machine learning, a subset of AI technique, you can build AI systems that can ingest more data, and through statistical method, it can improve the performance of AI systems. Whereas deep learning is a further subset of machine learning. It refers to machine learning using multi-layered artificial neural networks or deep networks. Just by that description, you might feel, wow, this method, it's kind of special. Indeed, it's an artificial neural network is a mathematical model designed to mimic how neurons and synapses work in our brain. So we're creating digital brain with this technique. This used to be just one way of doing machine learning, one way to build AI systems. However, in the last 20 years, with 3 factors coming together, it became the method to build AI. The concept of artificial neural network was invented all the way back in the 1950s, but we didn't have practical way to make it work for decades. However, in the early 2000s into the 2010s, methodological breakthroughs start to appear again. And on top of that, we start to have really powerful computers, and we created so much data on the internet. These factors combined created a perfect storm and really unlocked the huge potential of deep learning. And now with deep learning powered AI, machines can all of a sudden do things we did not expect them to learn so quickly, such as computer vision. It's pretty much solved at this point. A computer vision system can look at a photo and tell you very accurately what objects are there. Some other AIs can now do translation really well. Some others can teach robotic arms how to manipulate things. Some others can even generate design. This chassis of the bike full of holes is designed by an AI from ground up. So the 2 examples on the bottom row belong to a category of AI called generative AI. Generative in the sense it's supposed to take in a little bit input, many times in the form of instructions for the AI system, and then generate a lot of useful information back to you. One example in this category, an infamous example perhaps, is deepfake. So I have this little animation down here. If you can see, you can map real people's real facial expression onto still photos. So these are AI generated facial movements. The AI tools capturing the public imagination this year, like ChatGPT, like Midjourney, are just the brightest and newest stars in this category. So that leads us to today, the rise of generative AI. And we'll focus on ChatGPT because of its historical importance. When ChatGPT was released about this time last year, it was hailed by many tech pioneers as the iPhone moment of AI. So for those of you who don't know, ChatGPT is a chatbot, but it's not your grandpa's chatbot. This chatbot is so smart. Not only can it carry a very convincingly human-like conversation with you, it seems to know a lot of knowledge in all kinds of areas, from historical facts to theorems in modern physics, and can even do all kinds of tasks related to text, like drafting emails, preparing reports. It's built by OpenAI. When this chatbot was put in front of the public, just like iPhone, it made people realize with such an intuitive interface how smart AI is becoming and how much potential this technology has. So right now, ChatGPT is powered by 2 iterations of GPT models. They are large language AI models optimized for human-like conversation. If you haven't used it, I highly recommend to have a first-hand experience. You can log on to this website and get access to their free version powered by the lesser of the 2 models. But if you want access to the smarter and more reliable model, there's a paid version called ChatGPT Plus that will cost you $20 a month. So we all know what chat means, but what does GPT mean? Well, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. I know it just rolls off your tongue. Generative in the sense that it's supposed to take in some instructions and give you a lot of useful output back to you. Pre-trained refers to the fact that the learning phase of the model, what we call training of the AI, was done before the model was packaged into this chatbot and put in front of us. Transformer refers to a huge kind of robot that can change between vehicle form and human form. And of course, I'm joking. It's not that kind of transformer. It's actually not that kind of either. It's this kind. It just shows you how good engineers are at naming things. Somehow they're all transformers. You don't have to really understand this very complicated diagram. It describes what we call a model architecture. It's a blueprint for you to organize your deep learning network in a certain way. And this transformer is really, really special. It was published by Google as a scientific paper in 2017, and I believe that's the most important publication in my lifetime. And the title of that paper was "Attention is All You Need." And that magical sentence unlocked the path to today's powerful AI. So some of you in the audience might be thinking at this moment, okay, you unpacked the acronym, but that's still nonsense to me. Fair? So I'll try to explain how language model works even more, or demystify AI even more, and hopefully it'll give you a ground understanding how they work. So when we talk about training AI, what we really do is mathematically showing the model a lot of examples. And have the model correct itself based on what we believe is correct in this task. For example, if we want to train a model to look at photos of cute animals and tell us whether there's a puppy or a kitten in the photo, then we need a lot of these photos. These are our training data, but they also need to come in pairs. For each photo as an input into the model, we also need a label that indicates if the model is doing the job properly, what is the correct answer it should give back to us. So the training process is essentially we make the model guess what they're saying in these photos, and every time it gets wrong, the chasm between their wrong answer and the correct answer as indicated by these labels will trigger a process that tweaks the inner working of the model ever so slightly so it gets better. And the whole training process is just doing this over and over again. Here's where the very special transformer architecture comes in, because that architecture allows models to use human-like attention to understand context. And that's the key of learning human language. So when training language models, instead of photos, the examples we're using are humanly written sentences, except we masked out certain words in there and asked the model to guess, what do you think the missing words are? And of course, the correct answer are the actual words we masked out. Through this kind of training, AI can start to understand what human word tend to appear with what other human word in what kind of language context. And that's how it starts to understand human language. More importantly, that's how it starts to learn the knowledge encoded in our language. So now we have a path toward helping AI understand human knowledge in general. The last ingredients in this recipe to make them as smart as ChatGPT is size. So when language models are running, it's really just guessing the missing words. It takes in some words as input and try to generate what makes sense next. In ChatGPT's case, though, its learning material it's so huge, it's mind-boggling. Basically, ChatGPT's GPT models learn the internet. Everything you can think of, you put on the internet, your LinkedIn profile, your Amazon review, your YouTube comments, your own blog, everything publicly available on the internet were used to train the AI. And the model itself is also huge with hundreds and billions of parameters in there. There's an enormous capacity to capture information and knowledge. And instead of guessing puppies and kittens, whenever you talk to ChatGPT, when you say something, what the bot is trying to do is essentially, okay, my human user said that. What would a human say next? That's all it does. So basically, I'm telling you, ChatGPT is just a very complicated Mad Libs machine. And before we move on, have you noticed anything interesting about this little cute robot? I like this drawing, very human-like expressive face and very glossy armor, and even a beautiful background. It's generated by an AI. I searched for cute robot thinking, pondering, and did not like any of the stock photos out there. So I went to an AI image generator, and this is what I got. One of the better ones, by the way. So now let's take a look at the state of the art, GPT-4. So GPT-4 is the more powerful one of the two powering ChatGPT today. It was released in March this year, still considered the most capable, most well-rounded AI model out there. When I talk to ChatGPT powered by GPT-4, it feels like I'm talking to a generalist knowledge worker. Jack of all trades, expert in some. It does seem to know a little bit of everything. And some of those areas it knows are indeed specialized, but master a precious few. Because if you try to explore extremely niche topics, or if you have really high expectations when it comes to the depth of the AI's insight or the level of creativity you're expecting from the AI, you will see it falter. So there's a clear limit you can push it to. So that's my verdict on the state of the art. When it comes to utility, in theory, a large language model can do any task that can be described in and completed with text and symbols. However, in reality, it can only do certain of these tasks well. Here comes one of the two take-home messages I want you to remember over anything else I say in this presentation, which is no AI today can exceed its training data. So to explain why ChatGPT do these things well, you need to keep in mind that it's trained on the internet. So whatever is overly represented on the internet or well represented on the internet, it tends to do well. Like answering factual questions about well-documented topics, including giving instructions about general tasks. Or write well-templated content like emails, reports, cover letters, the kind of stuff you can find a lot of examples online. Additionally, the general ability of manipulating language that need to be used in all these tasks is pretty refined at this point. ChatGPT can do a really good job when it comes to editing, rewriting, and even translation. Also, in addition to human language, the model is also trained on a lot of programming code. So its coding ability is very impressive too. However, I always find it more revealing when it comes to understanding AI's nature when we look at its limitations. And my God, there are limitations with these systems. First of all, just because how the AI is trained, you have some very unfortunate tendency. ChatGPT is a sycophant who occasionally hallucinates. A sycophant in the sense that it's optimized for having a pleasant human conversation. It caves to your opinion so quickly in order to be polite to you. Hallucination refers to a phenomena where AI system just started making things up. It's saying seemingly correct things, but when you look closely, it's all kinds of falsehood. Again, this has partially to do with the fact it just wants to carry a classic conversation. Apparently, saying I don't know something is a conversation stopper. So it's almost better for them to make something up, and as long as the conversation companion cannot tell, the conversation just continues. These AI systems have limited quantitative abilities. The context and words approach of training is good for the AI to learn language, but not so good for it to learn complicated math. If you push it to do very challenging quantitative tasks, it can usually get the process and the formula right, but the calculation will be a mess. And also keep in mind, even though these AI seems to understand our world pretty well, it learned all about our world through language. It never really had physical experience. So when it comes to some very simple physical phenomena, some of these AI models still make hilarious mistakes. Then we arrive at some limitations mainly caused by the limitation of its training data. Because it's trained on the internet, when it comes to topics, we just don't talk that much on the internet, such as highly niche expert areas. That will be the AI's knowledge blind spot. On the flip side, whatever is overrepresented on the internet tend to be the AI's go-to. If you ask questions in a very generic way, without much nuance or specificity, the AI tend to give you a mediocre internet average as the answer. As a result, sometimes when I talk to these chatbots, it feels like I'm talking to a politician. It's very, very good at saying seemingly reasonable things in a very professional and polite way, but of no substance at all. At this point, you might feel that I feel underwhelmed. In fact, I hate those kind of people, phonies. But if we can also be honest with ourselves, the ability to say a lot of things without actually saying anything, that's an important ability to have for certain professions these days. Lastly, there are still technical limitations if you want to use these models to build your own software. The main one to keep in mind is by software standards, this is still pretty expensive because it consumes so much computing power. So that's the present. Now let's take a peek into the future, and we will start with the trends we are already seeing, things we can feel more certain about. The top trend in AI in the last few months is big tech companies are starting to release their own AI models to compete with GPT-4. Palm 2 is Google's answer to GPT-4. This interface in Chinese is the chatbot interface for the large language model released by Huawei. And it looks like their strategy is going to be integrating their AI model as quickly as possible into their existing products. And integration is certainly another very notable trend. Microsoft, who invested a lot into OpenAI, has already integrated GPT-4 into its Bing search, with more ambitious AI features to come for Microsoft Office. Google, not to be left behind, announced this AI-powered search function. And just a week ago, so I had to update my slides in a very timely fashion to reflect a very recent important development in AI. That OpenAI announced a turbo version of GPT-4. So this is their effort of moving their cutting-edge, more experimental stuff into more commercialized phase. Turbo is faster, cheaper, and more reliable with the level ability GPT-4 already has. Another set of experimental features coming to commercialization is multimodal models. Multimodal in the sense that in addition to manipulating text, now AI can also hear, talk, look at photos, and draw photos for you. So the elephant in the room. When you have something so human-like, of course, the knee-jerk reaction is to ask, is this going to replace human, right? GPT-4 has already passed many important professional exams. It did not pass those exams with flying colors. It's just a B student. But it's a B student educated in every known discipline. And it's getting more powerful as we speak. All those limitations I listed for you, we can see visible improvement from the previous generation to the current generation. And I shudder to imagine what the next generation will look like. So are we doomed? Well, when you have something so convincingly human-like, it's natural to think them as mechanical human. Maybe the mechanical human is a bit dumb at the moment, but what if in the future we have armies of these automatons and the dumb mechanical human becomes the super mechanical human? Are they going to come after us? Well, as somebody who has a social science background and who worked with the AI hands-on, I don't think this is a very helpful analogy. In fact, it's a bit of a Hollywood oversimplification. A better analogy I want to help you to think is, imagine this as the invention of the internal combustion engine or the robotic arm, but this time for knowledge work. Just like how the invention of the engine gave rise to all sorts of vehicles, and after a robotic arm came onto the scene, manufacturing has been completely transformed. I think what's likely to happen is the AI technology will serve as a core piece and drive automation that previously not possible, and be combined with other technology into new tools we're yet fully imagined. And these new tools will also be combined into new ways of producing things, new ways of doing business that are yet for us to fully imagine. So what I'm really saying is AI is automation. That's the second take-home message I want you to remember. AI equals to automation. Repeat after me. AI equals to automation. So I say not yet fully imagined, but in the last few months after ChatGPT was released, many people who are enthusiastic about using AI has been experimenting, and we're already seeing some promising use cases emerging. I organized them into 4 different categories. I think this sort of gives us an idea how we are likely to use AI for work in the future. The first one, I gave them some creepy names, and also an imaginary instruction you can give to this type of AI to accomplish certain tasks. They're a little bit exaggerated, but gives you an idea. in a more tangible way. So the first one I call prolific drafter. Well, these are generative systems, right? The natural way of using them is just generate a lot of things. We're now seeing medical doctors using ChatGPT to draft business emails to insurance companies, software developers generating boilerplate code to kickstart their project. One of LHH's marketing director told me that to her, the biggest value of ChatGPT is the elimination of the fear for the blank page. So the keyword here is drafting. It's still quite risky to consider that these AI can just generate client-ready content. Even if the stuff it drafted looks pretty good, you still want to examine it yourself and maybe polish it before sending anything out. The second type I call efficient scribe. This refers to any technique that leverage the language ability of these AI to manage a large amount of documents, text-based data essentially. Even before these models were packaged into chatbots, before they started yapping, they were already doing this kind of job really well. We have tried and true systems in the medical field to manage medical records. And it's very generalizable. The same kind of technique can be used, for example, in the HR sector to manage a huge amount of resumes. The third kind is my favorite kind. I call a smart encyclopedia. One technical limitation to these models is that because they are pre-trained, they have a knowledge cutoff. When GPT-4 first came onto the scene, its knowledge cutoff was September 2021. So it knows the internet before that, but not after. With last week's release, that window got updated to April this year, but still not timely. So you cannot really replace this with your search engine for timely things. However, you can use that as a smart know-it-all about timeless things. You can ask it about scientific knowledge, established scientific facts, or explore historical events. I myself used it as a tutor to teach me step by step how to implement a new data analytical technique in a coding environment I set up. It's very patient with me. We even tried multiple approaches when the first approach did not work. I also used ChatGPT to do trip planning. And even though you cannot really replace your licensed professionals like a doctor or an accountant with these AI yet, it can still give you some very useful medical or accounting or even legal advice. I recently heard a very high-profile interview. The chairwoman of US Federal Trade Commission said she used ChatGPT to help her negotiate down a substantial medical bill. The last category I call dutiful executor. This is perhaps the most risky and most advanced type of use case. However, it also might be the one with the biggest economic potential. This is where you essentially treat the AI as a very polite, very knowledgeable, but also extremely passive intern. If you have a service protocol, perhaps proprietary service method, or just a general protocol of doing certain things in terms of knowledge work, if you can explain your method cleanly, step by step, very explicitly and nuanced, then you can just give those instructions to the AI and unleash it on your workload. It will do that 24/7 anywhere you want. So if you noticed any constant through lines of those examples, it's that this is really, again, about automation. It's about doing what we're doing more efficiently at a larger scale, you know, move those repetitive work to the machine instead of keep burdening human beings. So after those anecdotal examples, I want to show you some data. This is a study done this year in March by 2 MIT scientists. They recruited from the public a group of knowledge workers, including human resource professionals. But as you can see, these are the kind of typical white-collar workers, and gave them real work they tend to do in their profession, but a shorter, bite-sized version of them, like writing press releases, short reports, etc., etc. So at first, they did one round of these tasks on their own without any help. But in the second round, these workers are assigned into two groups. One group were asked to use ChatGPT to help them to complete the task. The other one, without even knowing they're in a study about AI, just completed the second round of task as they would normally. The results show that the group that used ChatGPT to help them completed the task on average 37% faster. And the quality of the work was rated by third-party raters afterward. And the task completed by with the help of ChatGPT was rated better, 20% higher in quality. So if you can generalize this kind of productivity boost to the economy, it will be earth-shattering. So here comes my main thesis. So this is what I think the most likely mechanism AI is going to impact our economy, which is mass automation in professional services. Inevitable production upgrade is coming to the service sector. And by service sector, I don't really mean your coffee shop, your barber shop, your laundromat. I'm talking about white-collar workers. I'm talking about us. Of course, in general, this should be a good thing. With higher efficiency, we can serve more granular market segments. We can offer more personalized services. However, we are also possibly risking overcapacity. Imagine this is the totality of our service sector workforce, and this is the amount of service we're providing right now. First of all, with AI joining our workforce, we need to learn how to work with them. I'm not sure whether our job will be taken away by AI directly, but I'm fairly certain that if you don't learn how to work with AI, somebody who will do your job better than you and take your job. That human will. And with increased productivity, we can produce so much more. But if the economy cannot simply absorb that much service, at least in the short term, then the workforce will have to shrink a little bit. So this is the real mechanism, I think, how AI will impact our labor markets on a grander scale. Next, I have some even more speculative thoughts about what's likely to happen, but I think we're running out of time. If we still have a bit time to wrap up, or even for Q&A, I'm okay to stay around.